For Officer Sean Riley, life behind bars was supposed to be about control. He was a respected guard in a California correctional facility, tasked with ensuring that prisoners like Victor Davis remained in line. He had always prided himself on his professionalism and his authority within the prison. But behind the guarded eyes and stern demeanor, Officer Riley was harboring a secret that threatened to shatter his entire life. Victor Davis, an inmate serving time for a violent crime, had become something of a fixture in the prison system. Quiet, composed, and keeping to himself, Victor wasn't like other inmates who flaunted their behavior. He was looking for redemption, even as he wrestled with his past. But when he found out about Officer Riley's secret life, he had no idea that it would lead to his own untimely death. A life meant for redemption was destroyed by betrayal, and everything changed. And what happens when this secret leads to a violent confrontation, one that will forever change your life and the lives of others around you? When the trusted authority becomes the one who's responsible for violence behind bars, what does it reveal about the system in which we place so much trust? What happens when love, lust, and power cross boundaries that should never have been crossed? In today's case, a tragic death behind bars sets off a series of events that will reveal dark secrets, corrupt motives, and an unspeakable act of violence. A seemingly normal day in a California prison turned into an unspeakable tragedy when Victor Davis was found dead under suspicious circumstances. The story begins with a secret affair, a relationship that defied the rules of the prison system. But when that affair escalated, a deadly confrontation occurred, one that would leave a prison community in shock and raise questions about loyalty, power, and the lengths people will go to keep their secrets hidden. The walls of the prison had always felt thick and impenetrable. Inmates knew their place, and guards knew theirs. But behind those walls, deep within the shadows, something darker was brewing. An affair between a guard and an inmate had gone unnoticed for months, until one day, it all came crashing down in a confrontation that no one expected. The crime itself didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary at first. A fight in the yard, a prisoner gone down, a prison guard trying to break it up. But Victor Davis wasn't just another inmate. Officer Riley wasn't just another guard. And this wasn't just another fight gone wrong. It was a crime born out of fear, manipulation, and a desperate need for control. It was an affair turned dangerous, a secret that had been hidden for far too long. Victor Davis had stumbled upon the one thing that could destroy Officer Riley's life, a truth that had to stay buried. But when Victor threatened to expose everything, Officer Riley could see no way out. The consequences of exposure were too great, and in that moment of panic, the unthinkable happened. In the heart of California's prison system, a chilling murder took place, one that left both the inmates and prison staff in shock. What seemed like a routine death behind bars soon unraveled into a horrifying tale of betrayal, manipulation, and dark secrets. The victim, Victor Davis, was a man with a troubled past, caught in a vicious cycle of crime and punishment. He was serving time for a violent offense, but like many prisoners, he still held on to a glimmer of hope for redemption. For years, Victor Davis had been navigating the harsh realities of prison life. He had become somewhat of a fixture in the facility, known by both inmates and staff for his unique blend of charm and trouble. On the surface, he seemed to be just another inmate doing his time, but as investigators would soon find out, there was more to his story than anyone knew. But behind the thick, cold walls of the prison, Victor Davis had formed an unexpected bond with Officer Sean Riley, someone who was meant to maintain order and discipline. Officer Riley was a seasoned guard, highly respected by his colleagues for his professionalism and tough exterior. He had always kept his distance from the inmates, but somehow, he had found himself drawn into a relationship with Victor Davis that would ultimately become the catalyst for a deadly turn of events. But what the public didn't know was that this seemingly innocent relationship between Officer Riley and Victor Davis was far from what it appeared. What began as a professional, respectful bond soon morphed into something much darker, a secret affair that neither party could afford to admit. And it didn't stop there. What started as a quiet exchange behind the prison walls would soon escalate into a deadly confrontation, one that would forever change both their lives and the lives of everyone around them. Victor Davis, who had been quietly keeping the affair under wraps, became aware of a dangerous truth that threatened everything. His knowledge of Officer Riley's hidden life was a ticking time bomb, one that would eventually explode in a violent act of betrayal. But Victor Davis wasn't the only one keeping secrets. As investigators would soon find out, Officer Riley was not just hiding his relationship with Victor Davis, he was hiding something far worse. A deadly HIV diagnosis, one that had been concealed from the world, including his illicit partner. What followed would be nothing short of tragic. A murder so violent it shocked the entire facility, leaving everyone wondering, was this crime really about an affair, or was it a desperate attempt to cover up an even darker truth? Victor Davis, known to the prison population as a quiet yet capable man, had spent years behind bars. His life outside the prison walls had been one of hardship, marked by a series of bad decisions that led him down a dark path. He wasn't a hardened criminal, instead, he was a man caught up in circumstances, pushed into a life of crime by factors beyond his control. Born into a troubled family, Victor had seen and endured more hardship than most could fathom. But despite his criminal past, there was something redeemable about him, a desire for redemption, a wish to start over once his sentence was complete. He wasn't a violent person by nature, but prison had a way of breaking even the strongest wills. Over time, Victor Davis adapted to the rules of the prison system. He had learned to be both invisible and visible at once, using his charm and wit to avoid trouble while still maintaining a sense of respect among his fellow inmates. Yet, Victor knew that true peace would only come when he left the confines of the prison, when he was granted his parole. His relationship with Officer Sean Riley began innocently. Victor had known officers in prison, some were decent people just trying to do their jobs, and others less so, often pushing boundaries and using their authority to manipulate. Officer Riley, though, had always been different. Victor never saw him as a typical officer. Riley didn't intimidate the inmates in the way some others did. He was calm, composed, and had a kind of personal warmth that made Victor feel like he could trust him. They would often converse about trivial matters, the kind of small talk that would be exchanged in passing. Over time, Victor began to confide in Officer Riley, seeking advice on his case, his parole, and his hopes for the future. What Victor never anticipated was that his growing trust in Officer Riley would turn into something darker. The two began sharing more personal stories, and Riley began opening up about his own life, his past struggles, his frustrations with the job, and the loneliness that came with his position. Eventually, what started as a mentor-mentee relationship evolved into something far more complicated, and much more dangerous. On the fateful day of Victor's murder, everything seemed routine at first. The loud clanging of doors echoed through the prison halls, and the sounds of inmates exchanging shouts and words of frustration filled the air. Nothing seemed amiss, and life went on as usual. Victor was working in the prison yard, doing his assigned labor, his mind occupied by thoughts of his potential release. For Officer Riley, it was just another day at work. But the tension in the air that morning was undeniable, and something didn't feel quite right. As Victor moved through the yard, he was approached by Officer Riley. The two exchanged a few words, and the conversation quickly escalated. Witnesses reported hearing raised voices, but no one knew what exactly had triggered the exchange. Some believed it was over the growing tension between Victor and Officer Riley as their affair began to unravel. Others speculated that Victor had learned more than he was meant to, and was threatening to expose Riley's HIV diagnosis to others. As the argument intensified, Victor attempted to walk away, but Officer Riley wouldn't let him go. In a fit of anger and panic, Officer Riley grabbed Victor and slammed him into the concrete ground. It was then that the situation turned fatal. Riley, consumed by a combination of rage, fear, and desperation, struck Victor with his baton, delivering fatal blows to the inmate's head and chest. The violence was swift and brutal, a reflection of the officer's panic to silence Victor once and for all. The other inmates in the yard watched in shock, too afraid to intervene. They later reported the scene, some saying they saw Officer Riley standing over Victor, breathing heavily, while others testified they saw the officer's trembling hands. It was clear to everyone present that the confrontation had been unlike any other. Victor Davis lay motionless on the ground, blood staining the concrete, his life extinguished in an instant. When the authorities arrived, they found Victor Davis lying lifeless in the prison yard, his body covered in blood. The crime scene was chaotic. Correctional officers rushed to secure the area, but there was little they could do for Victor. Paramedics arrived soon after, but by then, it was already too late. Victor had suffered severe head trauma and was declared dead at the scene. Detective Jessica Harris was assigned to lead the investigation. Known for her methodical approach and sharp attention to detail, Detective Harris quickly took charge of the case. She was immediately struck by the fact that Victor's death seemed out of the ordinary for a prison incident. There were no obvious signs of a typical prison altercation. No knives, no makeshift weapons. It seemed that Officer Riley had used only his baton, a blunt weapon. And despite being an officer of the law, there was something that didn't sit right about his actions. Witnesses gave conflicting reports. Some said they saw the two men arguing, while others claimed they had been too far away to see anything of importance. The lack of concrete evidence and the ambiguity of the situation made it clear this wouldn't be a simple case of prison violence. As the investigation continued, Detective Harris began to question Officer Riley's relationship with Victor Davis. She learned from prison staff that the two men had become closer over time, often sharing private conversations. The affair, once a rumor among the inmates, now seemed like the key to unlocking the mystery. However, there was more to the story. Officer Riley's sudden and unexpected behavior after the killing raised even more questions. Riley had been visibly shaken after the incident, but instead of seeking help, he had fled the scene, disappearing into the prison's depths. As the investigation began to unfold, all eyes turned to Officer Sean Riley. He was the last person seen with Victor Davis, and the evidence pointed directly to him. But why would a respected correctional officer murder an inmate in such a brutal and public manner? What would drive someone in a position of power, someone sworn to protect and serve, to take the life of a prisoner under his care? Detectives first focused on the immediate circumstances. Was this just another prison fight gone wrong, or was there something more to it? Officer Riley had been a model officer, well liked by his peers, with no prior complaints or incidents. Yet, as investigators looked deeper into his background and the relationship he had with Victor Davis, the picture began to change. The affair, initially just a rumor, now seemed to have been a much bigger part of the case than anyone realized. But was jealousy the only motivation? Could there have been more to the story? The relationship between Officer Riley and Victor Davis had been a closely guarded secret, but now, with Victor Davis dead, it seemed that everything about their bond was under scrutiny. Investigators began to explore the idea that the affair was more than just a matter of emotional betrayal, it could be the key to understanding what led to the murder. Did Officer Riley feel that his position of authority was being compromised by this secret relationship? Was his fear of exposure the driving force behind the killing? Could the officer have feared that Victor Davis was planning to reveal the affair to others, threatening not only his job but his personal life as well? The investigation into Officer Sean Riley took a dark turn when authorities uncovered disturbing details about his personal life. Forensics experts combed through the prison's records, and it didn't take long for them to uncover something that no one had expected. Hidden communications between Officer Riley and Victor Davis revealed a web of secrecy, with discussions about their illicit relationship and hints of coercion. The officers discovered that Victor Davis had been blackmailed into keeping their relationship a secret. Officer Riley had threatened to ruin Victor Davis's chances of parole if he ever told anyone about the affair. The correspondence revealed the officer's fear of exposure, and it became increasingly clear that this wasn't just a relationship built on love, it was one based on control and manipulation. But the real shock came when Detective Jessica Harris uncovered a report about Officer Riley's health. Officer Riley, it turned out, had been diagnosed with HIV years earlier. The diagnosis had been kept hidden from everyone, even from Victor Davis. Was this the true catalyst for the murder? The affair, while damaging, was not the only secret Officer Riley had been hiding. The HIV diagnosis, combined with his fear of being exposed, painted a clearer picture of the officer's growing paranoia. The relationship was no longer about love, it was about survival. Officer Riley had manipulated Victor Davis into silence, using the threat of destroying his chances for release as leverage. Could Victor Davis's threat to expose the affair have been what triggered the violence? The more the detectives uncovered, the clearer it became. The killing was not just about betrayal, it was about fear and control. Just when the case seemed to be at a dead end, new evidence surfaced. DNA results from the crime scene pointed to someone no one had suspected, Officer Sean Riley. For days, the investigation had focused on potential conflicts between Victor Davis and other inmates, but the truth was far more sinister. Officer Riley, the very person entrusted with overseeing the inmates, was the last person seen with Victor Davis before his brutal death. DNA evidence found at the scene, including blood and tissue samples, confirmed the officer's involvement. At first, this revelation stunned everyone involved. Officer Riley had been careful, methodical, and manipulative, so much so that the true extent of his role in the crime had remained hidden. The detectives were shocked, not by the officer's guilt, but by how well he had covered his tracks. It wasn't just the DNA evidence that implicated Officer Riley. A breakthrough in the case came when investigators uncovered a series of encrypted files on the prison's network, hidden away under false names. After weeks of intense work by the prison's IT team, the files were decrypted. Inside, they found chilling details. Not only did Officer Riley have access to Victor Davis's parole records, but there were also threatening messages between the two. The most telling part of the files revealed the officer's deepening anxiety. Fear of being exposed had driven him to blackmail Victor Davis, to use his position of authority to hold Victor's future hostage. The blackmail was based on an agreement to keep their affair hidden. But as the relationship became more toxic, Victor Davis had started talking to others, possibly threatening to reveal the truth about both the affair and Officer Riley's HIV status. With this new evidence, the investigators pieced together the sequence of events that led to Victor's murder. The murder wasn't just a crime of passion, but a desperate attempt by Officer Riley to silence Victor before the secret got out. It became clear, Officer Riley murdered Victor not only to protect his career but also to cover up the truth about his own health, his HIV status, which could endanger his career and his life. But here's the twist, after the discovery of an encrypted file on a prison laptop, everything began to make sense. The file, which had been hidden away and remained undetected by the authorities for weeks, contained not only medical records but also cryptic messages and threatening emails exchanged between Officer Riley and Victor Davis. The contents revealed more than anyone had imagined. The affair was not merely about lust or a forbidden attraction, it was about domination, control, and manipulation. Officer Riley had been using the affair as a tool for blackmail. Victor Davis, once a vulnerable prisoner, had become a pawn in Riley's dangerous game. The officer had been using his power to manipulate Victor, threatening to ruin his chances of ever being released from prison. In exchange for silence about the affair, Officer Riley had promised Victor a shot at parole, a chance at freedom. But that promise was empty. Victor Davis began to realize the truth, he was being controlled by the very person who was supposed to protect him. The affair, the blackmail, the fear of exposure, it was all too much. As Victor Davis became more vocal about his intentions to expose the truth, Officer Riley began to panic. The officer knew that if anyone found out about the affair, his career would be over, and his HIV status, something he had fought so hard to keep hidden, would be exposed to the world. When Victor Davis threatened to go public with everything, Officer Riley snapped. The man who had once been his confidant became a liability, and the only way to silence him was with violence. The confrontation, which had started with words and ended with murder, was driven by one man's desperation to maintain control over the affair, control over Victor Davis, and ultimately, control over his own dark secret. The truth was clear now, the murder was not just a crime of passion, it was the final, deadly act in a long series of manipulations and deceptions. Officer Riley had not only killed to protect his secret but to maintain his power over Victor Davis, an inmate who had come to symbolize everything the officer feared: loss of control, exposure, and the destruction of everything he had worked so hard to hide. After a lengthy trial, the truth finally came to light. Officer Sean Riley was convicted of first-degree murder, his reputation in ruins and his life shattered. The court's decision was a moment of closure for Victor Davis's family, but it didn't bring them the peace they had hoped for. While the conviction confirmed that justice had been served, it could not bring their loved one back, and the scars of that tragic day would never fully heal. The trial was a turning point, not only for the families involved but for the entire correctional facility. The prison system, once seen as a place where justice was carried out with fairness, now had a dark cloud hanging over it. Officer Riley had been one of the few trusted to maintain control over the inmates, yet here he was, a man who had taken advantage of that trust to manipulate, control, and ultimately murder an inmate. The ripple effects of this crime reverberated far beyond the courtroom. The prison system, once thought to be a controlled and predictable environment, was shaken to its core. The murder had exposed a dangerous breach of trust, and the fallout was felt by every correctional facility in California. The very system that was supposed to maintain order had allowed one of its own to manipulate, control, and ultimately kill. Officer Riley's actions cast a dark shadow over the profession, one that would be hard to erase. For Victor Davis's family, the trial had been a painful but necessary step in their healing process. They had spent years living in uncertainty, hoping that Victor Davis would one day find redemption. But instead, they were forced to confront the brutal reality of his death. They had always believed in the system's ability to protect their loved ones, but this case proved how wrong that belief could be. The emotional toll of the crime extended beyond the families directly involved. Officer Riley's family, too, was left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. His wife, children, and colleagues were left reeling from the realization that the man they had known and trusted was capable of such a heinous act. How could someone who had sworn an oath to protect and serve descend into such a brutal betrayal? His family had to reconcile their image of the man they thought they knew with the monster who had taken another life in cold blood. For Victor Davis's family, the pain of his loss was compounded by the revelation of the affair and the blackmail. They had always known he had a troubled past, but no one had imagined that the very people who were supposed to be his protectors had been his tormentors. His parents, siblings, and friends were forced to grapple with the fact that his death was not just the result of his own mistakes. It was the result of a systemic failure, one that allowed a powerful officer to take advantage of a vulnerable man. The emotional scars would never fade. The correctional facility itself was left in turmoil. The murder and its aftermath raised serious questions about the integrity of the staff, the treatment of inmates, and the procedures in place to prevent such tragedies. The prison system, which had once seemed like a well-oiled machine, now appeared flawed and corrupt. Could such an event have been prevented? Had Officer Riley's actions been overlooked for years? And how many other secrets were hiding behind the walls of the facility? Though the case was officially closed, many questions remained unanswered. Was Officer Riley the only one responsible for the murder, or was there someone else involved in helping him cover his tracks? Victor Davis had known about the affair, but had he learned of the officer's HIV status? And if so, could that have been the final straw in a relationship that was already on the edge? Some speculate that Officer Riley's crime was part of a much larger conspiracy within the prison system. Could there have been other officers, or even inmates, who were complicit in the affair and its cover-up? The investigation didn't fully explore whether Officer Riley had acted alone, or if others had helped him manipulate Victor Davis or protect his secrets. The emotional impact on Victor Davis's family was profound, but so too was the question of how many more families might be affected by similar crimes hidden behind the walls of the prison system. The system that was meant to serve justice had, in this case, failed both the victim and his loved ones. The question remained, could anything have been done to prevent the tragedy, or was it just a matter of time before such a dark secret came to light? What do you think happened in this case? Do you believe Officer Sean Riley acted alone, or is there more to the story than we know? Could there have been others complicit in covering up the affair or the murder? How does the power dynamic within prisons contribute to tragedies like this one? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. What's your take on this complex case of betrayal, blackmail, and murder? Is this a case of a system failing to protect those who are supposed to be protected, or did Officer Riley act out of pure selfishness and fear? Can justice truly be served when the people tasked with upholding the law become the ones who break it? Your thoughts and feedback could shine light on new angles or theories that may have been overlooked during the investigation. Comment below and join the discussion. Be sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss out on our latest episodes. With every new case, we bring you exclusive insights and detailed breakdowns that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your support helps us continue to bring these stories to light, so make sure you subscribe, share, and stay tuned for what's next. Thank you for watching, and stay curious, stay safe, and keep questioning the world around you.